I'm Erin Petrey. My father, Jack Petrey, owned an ad studio and production studio in Lexington, Kentucky called Studio Link. And I remember growing up, he always told me that he had these great conversations with master distillers way back in the early 90s. And it never really clicked until the guy who actually made that production possible, Chuck Cowdery, posted on Facebook saying that he had finally digitized that 1992 documentary. And I said, wait, is that the same one my dad was talking about? I clicked play, and as soon as that voice started, I knew that mellow, deep voice as the one of my father's. So I reached out to Chuck to learn what actually led up to the production, what the production was like, and his memories of my father. Chuck, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Sure, happy to do it.
So would you mind just doing a quick intro for those, the uninitiated, who don't know who Chuck Cowdery is?
Well, I mean, I'm basically a bourbon nerd. I mean, I lived in Kentucky from 78 to 80 and worked in advertising there and in marketing. And I grew up in Ohio, and my parents were bourbon drinkers, but so I was certainly aware of bourbon. But
what was their pour?
This is actually interesting because they were very parsimonious. But they would not drink anything except Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So they could have bought blends and so forth for cheaper. But so they basically would go to the liquor store, and the liquor stores in Ohio were state operated. So they always had a pretty limited selection. And they would basically buy the most inexpensive Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey that they had, but it had to be Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. That was the bottom line. And then whatever, so when I was growing up, it was mostly Mattingly and Moore. That was what we had around the house. And as the oldest son, my job when I was old enough, so maybe, 12, was to make their drinks. They were very temperate. Also, they would have one cocktail before dinner, and that was their sort of, with 6 kids, you kind of have to organize, private time. And so they prioritized their time together when Dad got home from work and Mom had dinner going, and we were to make ourselves scarce and, stay in the den and watch the Three Stooges while they sort of went over their day. And they did that with 2 bourbons on the rocks, and they never had more than one. The only difference was that my dad had, because like I said, I made the drinks. My dad had 2 ice cubes in his, and my mom had 2 ice cubes in hers, and my dad had 4 ice cubes in his. He liked it a little bit more diluted.
So your mom and I are on the same train. I'm always the 1 ice cube girl, not the big one, but just 1 regular ice cube, just a little to cool it down, a little to dilute it.
That's pretty much where I am too.
So Chuck, I'm curious to know, so what was the impetus? Like, how did you come around to being like in the early 90s, back in the time where bourbon was just really sort of clawing its way back into the zeitgeist? Why did you want to do this film?
I'm sure you've heard the expression cherchez la femme. Mm-hmm. There's always a woman in the story.
There is, I know.
Or unless you're a woman, then there's maybe a man in the story.
Maybe there's a guy, we don't know.
But at any rate, girlfriend who was a photographer, and we had gone on a vacation to England. And one of the things we had enjoyed doing, getting outside of London, going around the countryside, and we really enjoyed, at least I particularly enjoyed, the old castles, both the castles that were still sort of fixed up and operating and, inviting tourists, but also the ones that were just in some field somewhere that were just ruins. And, you've got some 500-year-old, 600-year-old walls that, the kids in the neighborhood are playing soccer and hitting soccer balls against. I mean, it's just part of their lives.
Yeah.
I got back to Kentucky, and I started, again, we're talking about now, I think this was actually 1989 that we took that trip. And going around Kentucky, we had sort of the same sort of thing. We had so many distilleries that had closed down, and many that were in ruins. And if you hit them at just the right time of day, they really looked beautiful. And they had that same kind of quality that those castles in England had. So we had talked about doing a like a coffee table book where she would do the photography and I would write the history of these things. And I was working in the industry on the marketing side at that time. So I was doing work for Brown-Forman. It was when I was working on the documentary, working on the research of it, and I found that most of the stuff that was printed about bourbon was written by either people in the wine business or people in the Scotch business, and then they would have like a little chapter at the end of their book talking about bourbon, and almost everything would be wrong. And that was sort of what got me, not so much, I mean, that was happened during the documentary, but that was sort of what prompted me to kind of keep going with it and keep trying to research it and try to get the sort of real story out there about these. And it's so, part of what struck me as coming from out of town was that I didn't feel like people in Kentucky really realized how unique the culture was around bourbon. And of course, it's also fascinating that Kentucky's always had this, love-hate relationship with it, where you've got bourbon, which now is a $9 billion industry for Kentucky.
Creeping
and
on
you've
10.
still got maybe a third of the states, a third of the counties in the state that aren't even allowed to sell it.
They're still dry, I know.
Still dry, or
lots of blue laws here.
Right. And so it's just a fascinating and so unlike anything else.
Yeah.
And so, again, back to the sort of cherche la femme, we broke up. And I kind of lost interest in doing a book because doing books was not what I really knew how to do. But my main business had been radio and television. I made commercials for various clients in Louisville and other places, and radio and TV commercials, and that had what I had been doing professionally in Ohio before I came here. So that was what I knew how to do. Well, and in fact, this girlfriend had let me know, and I think she knew Mike White.
Oh, Mike, yeah.
And
Mike, who the cameraman.
The cameraman on the project.
I ran into as he was out on a walk with his wife the other day.
Yeah, and Mike, I think, had told this woman about this program that the state was doing, that because 1992 was the bicentennial of Kentucky statehood, the legislature had actually appropriated a fairly decent amount of money for KET, and the purpose was...
It's our local PBS affiliate.
Right.
Yeah.
The purpose was for then the KET, Kentucky Educational Television, to make grants to people, to independent producers who would produce programs about Kentucky, Kentucky subjects. So I immediately wrote up a proposal to do a documentary about Kentucky bourbon. And I submitted it, went through the process and submitted it. And I get a phone call one day from a guy at KET, and he said, and he was very excited, and he said, I'm only supposed to tell you that we received your application. I'm just supposed to acknowledge that we received it.
Sure.
But I guarantee you're gonna get the grant. He said, this is exactly what we were looking for. We were hoping somebody would want to do something about bourbon. But the grants they were giving were pretty small. I could have done something, but I couldn't have done what I wanted to do. So I went to the KDA, the Kentucky Distillers Association, and they had just gotten some money from the federal government to do export promotion.
Great.
So they said, this would be a good way to do export promotion. You make this documentary, and we'll give copies of it to the journalists who come over, and that'll be good. We'll give you some money.
Yeah.
So went through that whole process, and the KDA board was on board, and they gave me the amount of money that I asked for. And about the only real wrinkle was, I said, here's the thing, we want to get this on public television, and not just in Kentucky. KDA, your KET will run it because they appropriated it. I said, but we want it to run everywhere. They'll make it available to other stations, and we want those stations to run it. So it can't be a commercial. It can't be, every brand telling its brand story. You got to let me control this.
The narrative, yeah.
And not, and God bless him, Bill Samuels.
We love him.
President of Maker's Mark. And Bill, of course, even today in his advanced years, but then he was a much younger and even more spry man.
I'm sure.
He, as he is wont to do, leapt to his feet and said, yes, Chuck's absolutely right. We can't tell Chuck what to do, because if we told Chuck what to do, I would be the worst. I would absolutely be the worst one.
That's awesome.
And so if I can't do it, none of y'all can do it. And so I won that one and got the complete control over the project.
That's great.
And that was really one of the reasons I wanted to do it. I had done so many commercial projects for other people where, of course, I have to satisfy the client, I have to please the client, but I wanted to do something where I had complete control of it. I could be my vision, it could be the story I wanted to tell the way I wanted to tell it.
And so one of the things you told me is that you caught some flack, right, from your fellow Louisvillians, right, for choosing a Lexington outfit to do this. And so how did you end up choosing my dad in Studio Link to do this project with you?
Well, as I said, what I was doing professionally at that time was primarily doing like radio and TV commercials.
Which is what my dad did, yeah.
And I had used your dad for voice work.
So you guys were, and can you touch on a little bit about
projects.
Can you touch on a little bit about how you would characterize his voice?
Well, that's an important part of this story.
Yep.
Because when I knew all the voice talent in the Chicago or in the Louisville area, I also knew voice talent in the Chicago area. I used voice talent from all over, and people back then, they would send you their sample tapes, and you would get to hear
a cassette tape. Yes.
What they, what their different voices they could do in different moods they could do and so forth. So I was very familiar with the voice talent that was available to me, and I certainly intended to use a professional voice talent. I wasn't going to, just ask somebody to, random to do it.
Rando off the street,
right. But the specific reason that I chose Jack was, got a great voice. A lot of guys who've got the great, booming voice, and I wanted that sort of voice of God, voice of authority. But the thing that the quality that Jack had that nobody else really had, or at least nobody else I knew had, was that he had the Kentucky accent.
He did. He was from Hazard, but he had the kind of sort of central Kentucky accent, but he didn't have that deep Appalachian accent.
No, what he had was the ability to have any amount of Kentucky accent that his producer wanted him to have.
That's amazing.
So and he was such a professional that I could basically turn it up or down like turning a knob. I can say, no, Jack, that's too Kentucky. Dial it back a little.
Okay.
And I got exactly what I wanted. I got just enough Kentucky.
Yeah.
And so it was really the selection of Jack and I didn't know Jack that well. I just knew him as a voice talent. And it was kind of, again, this was a long time ago, but I think
when did you kick off the project?
91.
91, so I was 4.
Yeah. So your memories of it may be different than mine, but I made that. I think that was maybe the first decision that I made, and I knew all the production companies, and I knew I could have used anybody for the production. But I think when I started talking to Jack about doing the voice, that was when he said, I've got a whole production company over here.
He did,
and he made a good pitch in terms of saying he'd already been to this distillery and shot this distillery and had talked to Booker Noe or talked to Elmer Lee or whoever it was, and so he already had not just he himself but also the company as a whole had familiar, and had some stock stuff that I was looking at. It all sort of fell into pieces that, oh my gosh, this is the right. And it never even occurred to me that the people I was used to working with in Louisville were going to resent me for using somebody in Lexington. That came.
We all Kentuckians, we all in this together, y'all. Come on.
That came later when people I thought were my friends and stuff started blowing me off, and I finally figured out that they were mad at me because I didn't let them do the project. And it was because it was, once it was out there that this was being done, everybody wanted to do it.
Of course they did.
But by then I'd already made the decision. And I couldn't have made a better decision. Jack was just in the studio doing the voice work. He wasn't around on the trips with us. But Mike and Roger Bondurant.
I know Roger.
And it was just the three of us. That was the whole crew. And I, carried a lot of light boxes and so forth. Because it was just the three of us doing this thing. We went to every distillery in Kentucky. We shot at the, James Crow's grave.
I know, yeah.
We in Versailles.
Yep.
And we said we pronounced it Versailles like you're supposed to.
Versailles, yep.
Not the funny Frenchy way that they
They're
do.
different places,
right? And like I said, the only active distillery we didn't go to at that time, because they had just shut down, was Owensboro. In Owensboro, they were no longer. They just shut down.
Was that OZ or?
It was what was then Medley.
Medley Brothers. Good. Yeah.
And there was so it wasn't worth making a trip to Western Kentucky to shoot a closed distillery.
Fair.
But we did shoot all the active distilleries, and a couple of them did a lot of shooting at Castle and Key because it was such, the old Taylor
Gorgeous.
plant was such a beautiful ruin, and it was like they had. Again, the other beautiful thing about this thing is because the industry wanted it so much, they let me go anywhere I wanted to go, let me do anything I wanted to do. And if there wasn't somebody we also went a few places we weren't supposed to go, but we got away with it. I've always believed that it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission.
Put it on my tombstone.
And
yes.
And the guy who was supposed to be watching over what was then LeBreau and Graham, now Woodford Reserve, which was also completely abandoned. We did some serious trespassing over there, and there was a guy who was living.
I think the statute of limitations is over, so I don't think we got to worry about that.
And the guy who was supposed to be watching over us, I may have talked to him, or maybe Mike did, because he was supposed to turn the dogs on us, and he didn't. So that went well. We actually had permission to be in at Old Taylor. We didn't get to shoot very much at Old Crow because we really couldn't get permission to get in there. But we shot and discovered things that I didn't think people. I don't even know who told me about this, but at Hobbs, Kentucky, which is a little wide spot in the road off 245.
Yep.
About midway between the expressway and Bardstown. That was where the original Granddad distillery was.
Right, yeah.
And we discovered the one thing that was fairly obvious was the huge concrete footers that had been used for the warehouses to keep the warehouses stable. But we also discovered that the spring it still had the wall, a partial wall around it where somebody had built a stone wall around the spring, to sort of use it more as a well. And it was not much of it was left, but there was enough to, get a good picture of. So we used that in the documentary, and it was just a lot of fun.
That's great.
It just so happened that 91, 92 was a bit of a recession. So some of my other business was not going that well, so to have this project and be able to just immerse myself in it, and Mike and Roger, of course, were up for anything, and Mike, like a lot of these shooters, would just risk his life to get a shot.
I have some memories as a kid of him getting onto very precarious situations. So yeah.
It wasn't him, but I remember one time doing a shoot in. With a crew from Kentucky, a different crew, in Brazil on the mountain where the Cristo statue is.
Yeah, the Christ the Redeemer, yeah.
And I'm behind the wall, completely secure, and I'm having like vertigo problems because it's just so high. And I look at our shooter; he's crawled out onto a ledge, to get a shot. And I'm like, oh my god!
We love the cameramen out there because y'all will risk it all for the shot.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, am I responsible if he kills himself?
Again, this is why you always need insurance.
Yeah, but it was just really fun, and it was really the better part of a year from probably June of '91 when I first. The other thing, because I was writing and producing and directing, I wanted to do it as efficiently as possible.
Sure.
And again, because this is my background, I kind of knew what I had to do. So I visited every distillery just myself to decide what I wanted to shoot there, what I wanted to capture there, who I wanted to interview there, so that when we actually got there with the crew, we were able to just, burn right through it because I knew exactly what I wanted to get at each place. That was an efficiency that allowed me to put more money in my pocket. Mm-hmm. And but it was just so much fun, and they were so much fun to do this with. And we'd go to this distillery or that distillery, and they'd give us a bottle or two, to thank us, and then we would make good use of that as the day wound down. And
I mean, listen, the worst whiskey is whiskey that's not opened. Because you got to open those bottles. Life is too short.
It's what they made it for. And
they did.
I remember a master distiller one time, it was during the sort of downturn in the industry, this distillery was closed for a while, and then people kept, when are you going to reopen? When are you going to reopen? He said, I guarantee you drink it all, we'll make more.
Exactly, right? So Chuck, my dad passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm personally sad that I can't sit down and watch this with him and for him to tell me those stories. But what would do you have a little bit of kind of like an Easter egg or a little nugget of something funny that happened during there? I mean, I know you said that they were supposed to send the dogs on y'all and y'all were trespassing and all these things. Is there anything that anybody said, or are there any kind of like stories that you remember from that production that you would be like, oh my gosh, you guys wouldn't even believe this?
Booker Noe was a lot of fun.
I know, right?
And Booker, you've always got these PR people, and Booker was not one to be controlled. And I remember one time at a different event when they were doing a tasting, and I asked, what the mash bills were.
Yeah.
And which is the combination of grains.
It's the grain recipe.
Grain recipe.
Yeah.
And of course, all the PR people are, oh no, we can't tell that. That's proprietary. 5 minutes later, Booker walks over to where I'm sitting, bends over and whispers them in my ear.
You're like, IP be damned.
Right. But the other thing I remember from the day that we did the shoot was that after we had wrapped up, and I think we'd even let we're not shooting anymore, and I think we'd let the PR people all go and so forth, but Mike and Roger and I and Booker are all still there, and he invites us to come out in the kitchen, which is where he did.
Did he serve you any of his salt rising bread?
No, but I've got a similar similar thing, and so we're sitting down at 10:30 in the morning, drinking Booker's, and even though it was Booker's, what Booker had at home as Booker's was just stuff that he had taken directly out of the barrel and put in a Jim Beam.
A little for me, a little for everybody else, a little for me.
Put in a Jim Beam 175 bottle,
Yeah, that's what's laying around.
And in fact, at that session, he told the story about how his wife, not once but twice, had forgotten that what was in those bottles was Booker's and not the 80
not regular
proof,
Jim Beam.
Not the 80 proof Jim Beam, but the 124
That's
proof.
a hot surprise.
No, and it wasn't that she drank it. It was that she made her baked beans recipe with it and blew the door off.
Wow.
Blew the door off the oven.
Oh my God.
And did that not once but twice. He said, Booker said, nobody was hurt, but that oven, and he showed, where the oven was and where the door landed on the other side of the room. And then, I said, he was just so gregarious and so
true
much fun.
hazmat. That was true hazmat.
Yeah. And he was so gregarious and so much fun. and it kind of wouldn't let us go. You know, he was enjoying himself. And as we were getting ready to leave, he's like, "Oh, hang on a second, I got something for you." And he goes running out and back, and he goes back to this brick structure in his backyard that I then came to learn is his smokehouse.
Yep.
And he comes back in and he gives each of us about a yard of venison sausage that he had made. And I mean, literally a hunk of sausage, you know, about a inch and a half around and about...
It's good eating.
About 3 feet long, 4 feet long, just all not cut up or anything, not wrapped. He just pulled it off the rafters in the smokehouse and brought it in, gave us each one of them.
It's not a bad parting gift.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck, you know how the industry is. I mean, gosh, I feel like, Booker, if he were around right now, seeing this, he would be like, wow, this is nuts, right? Like, what's happening? But, we are faced.
If he could see what Freddie is doing.
Oh my gosh, amazing. So proud.
He'd be so proud.
Oh, I absolutely agree. But, we are seeing that, the industry is going through what I feel is a correction. I don't think it's a bust.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? It's a correction. A big industry. We had a huge influx of capital and interest from consumers during the pandemic, especially. And now we're seeing a little bit of a correction. But if you could, look into your crystal ball, where do you think the industry, what are the big changes in the industry that you think that are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I have not been a good predictor.
Yeah. So let's just say whatever he says, it's the opposite.
Right. And most of these things, a lot of these things that have happened, I never would have predicted, but no one else would have ever predicted either, that it was going to grow the way that it has, and that it would, that this festival would develop the way that it has, and the people coming here just, the whole thing with the special bottles and the limited releases and the passion that people have for that stuff.
Sure.
That's been kind of unusual. I think what we're seeing right now was something that couldn't continue in the sense of you just can't. No industry can grow as fast as this industry was growing forever.
No.
It has to hit another level.
It's self-limiting in a way.
And because of just the nature of the way the industry was still actually kind of immature when Prohibition happened, and then has never been able really to get steady on its feet since Prohibition until fairly recently.
Yep.
We don't really know, we say, oh, it's cyclical, but we don't know what the cycle is because we've never really been through a normal cycle. So I think that really what we're going
What does normal even mean, right?
Well, but I think that's what we're going to find out now. We're going to find out what normal is for bourbon. But when bourbon crashed in the 70s, it was kind of already at the bottom. Working in the industry, there were a lot of people who were very seriously saying, bourbon may not be even around in 10 years.
Wow.
And rye whiskey was almost dead at that point, almost completely dead at that point. 4 distilleries were making it, and they were all making it maybe one day, maybe 2 days a year in terms of what they were actually distilling. It was that, and it had gone down that much. And bourbon wasn't much better. Distilleries were being closed for, 18 months, a year, or maybe just, producing for a month or two just to, get some new make in the barrels, but not really be so. So I think what has happened in the last 20 years is that bourbon has reached a level that it never had achieved before as being the international equal of the finest spirits sold in the world. And it really was never like that before. But now bourbon is in the same class. The finest bourbons are in the same class with the finest scotches,
cognacs,
the finest cognacs,
Armagnacs,
the
all of
finest
that.
rums, the finest agave spirits, whatever it might be. Bourbon is in the conversation.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, bourbon, especially when you talk about, the not a lot of this sort of fancy finish stuff and the, special limited, but just regular old everyday bourbon is still a great value. It's still a very inexpensive product that certainly competes very favorably with cognac and Armagnac and Scotch and Irish whiskey. And
I agree.
You know, you can still do better with bourbon in terms of price than you can with a lot of the other sort of comparable spirits.
Sure.
So I think some of, I think there will be some distilleries that won't be able to make it. It won't be the big guys. It'll be some of these people who were, sort of quickly trying to get a hold of catch the tiger by the tail, and the tiger got away, and tiger went to sleep, whatever metaphor you want to,
oh my gosh, I know.
stretch, because, things are not going to be it's not going to be like it was 10 years ago when everybody was producing, absolutely putting in as much into the barrels as they could.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to start to see what normal is for this industry, and it's not going to lose. I'd be surprised if it loses any real volume. I think all we're really going to see is a slower growth.
Yeah, So.
And I don't think it's going to go flat. I think it's going to keep growing. I think it's just going to grow at a slower, at what might be a very normal. You can't keep
going like this.
Right, and it's not going to be 10, 12, 15%, but I think everybody in the industry would be happy if it grows at 4 to 5% a year.
Yeah, that's totally fair,
on a steady rate, or even 3% a year. I mean, that's good for a mature industry.
It's also sustainable, yeah.
Right, and even though the bourbon industry has changed so much, it is still a mature industry. It's still a product that's been around a long time, and that people are familiar with. So I think it's going to be okay, and I think
good.
And I think the other thing is, I just got off a panel with a couple of young guys. I mean, to me, young guys are anybody under 40, but I think that it's some of these young people who are involved in this industry. I say guys, but there's a lot of young women who are also doing exciting things. The distiller at the new Heaven Hill distillery is a young woman.
Yep.
And I think that they're doing really creative things, really interesting things with wood, with blending. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years, is because things are not going to be so crazy, people are going to be able to concentrate a little bit more and do really interesting things and let them develop in a more organic way, and not be on this sort of treadmill of trying to catch the new hot thing, but being able to really develop the way a mature industry should, to keep innovating but not go out of their minds with it.
Yeah, completely. Well, Chuck, I am immensely grateful for you for digitizing that documentary. And I think that it's so important for us to kind of look at where we came from and where we are now. So I would absolutely encourage everyone to go and watch the documentary on YouTube.
We should probably say the name of.
Yes, what is the name of it?
The name is Made and Bottled in Kentucky.
Yes.
And it is on YouTube, and it is free. So about the only kind of caveat I would make is that it's still 1992 technology that it was made with. It was made with state-of-the-art at the time, but it's certainly not the high definition that we have today. But
and you can get a lovely sort of experience of my dad's voice, which is deep and rich and mellow, just like Kentucky Bourbon. And Chuck, I want to thank you so much for digitizing that. You brought me back an amazing memory. And it's amazing. I think my dad would be very proud that folks are hearing him be able to tell our story, your story, the story of Kentucky, the story that's truly the foundation of a lot of our culture here too.
He really enjoyed being part of it. He really enjoyed that he was able to have that role and be that person who would, take that story into the future, and that it would outlive him and so forth. Yeah. So, he was very tickled with the end result of it. It started out as just another job, but I think he was really tickled with how it wound up and what his role in it was able to be. And I was very tickled with the job that he did on it. So I couldn't have been happier.
Well, Chuck, I want to thank you so much.
To talk to you.
Chuck Cowdery, Made and Bottled in Kentucky. The story of Kentucky Bourbon as told from the lens of the Kentucky Bicentennial in 1992, narrated by my father, Jack Petrey. I'm Erin Petrey, Bourbon and Banter cocktail editor, and this has been a conversation with Chuck Cowdery. And make sure you watch that documentary to see where we've come from. Cheers, y'all.